Hello, this is Hollisa Alewine. Welcome back to our continuing series, the 7 Abominations of the Wicked Lamp. And we have finished the 7 seals. And now we are, I don't want to say we're on the downhill slide. I think we're still moving up here because we are moving into the 7 trumpets. And like I said, the 7 trumpets, there's very practical applications to these 7 trumpets. It's heavily based in the instructions of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, the books of Moses. Really, everything you ever needed to know about a trumpet in Revelation, you're probably going to find in the Torah. What's interesting, of course, is how easy it is once you know what's in the Torah. Because, for instance, you're told in the Torah that you were supposed to blow the trumpets over each festival. Well, what do we know? In terms of our 7 Moedim, we've got 7 festivals, right? So if you blow a trumpet over each festival, then that pretty well accounts for the 7 trumpets. And I guess we could just stop right there and say, well, that's the explanation of the 7 trumpets. And I don't think we'd be too far off base. But we could make some comments on it. I think there's some interesting things to say about these trumpets. Of course, if you notice in the Psalms, because in the Torah, it'll deal more, if you're looking at the Feast of Trumpets or the trumpets that should be blown over the feasts, it will deal with those in terms of silver trumpets. The shofar does appear. The Yovel does appear, but perhaps in the Torah there's more of a dichotomy between the trumpets for the feasts and then the Yovel is brought into it in terms of the Shemitah year, which we know the Yovel, it's a ram's horn. That's a shofar. But also a shofar is a shofar. And so we say, well, where did the Jews ever get the idea of blowing a shofar at particular feasts when really the simple explanation says they're supposed to be blowing silver trumpets? Well, sometimes you have to keep reading and see practically how was this applied. And so you may have to read as far as the Psalms to see that they're doing both. The practices, they're blowing the silver trumpets at particular feasts and new moons, but they're also blowing shofars at the very same time. And so it's not really adding to the Torah, it's bringing together different concepts of the Torah and seeing them as both being part of the prophecies associated with the Sabbaths, the new moons, and of course the 7 feasts. And here's what's interesting. We've been talking a lot about the book of Revelation, but if you listen to Orthodox Jews discuss the Israelite experience at Mount Sinai, it's referred to as the Revelation. So the Revelation of John, I suspect, is going to be a mirror, I suspect, not just of what happened at Mount Sinai at the giving of the Torah, the Revelation, but all that is contained within that Torah, the Revelation. So I think in John's eyes, this is going to be a parallel event. What we learn at the foot of Mount Sinai is pretty much what John is trying to convey to us in his Revelation. And there's so many parallels between the Revelation at Sinai and John's Revelation. One of the most obvious, of course, is going to be the principles of the 7. The giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai was marked on the feast of Shavuot. Shavuot. And if you can think of it this way as too, Shavuot commemorates the giving of the Revelation. So the Revelation of John is also a revelation of the Torah, even down to the 7 shofar blasts. Because another word for a shofar, a trumpet, is Yovel. And Yovel is also the word for Jubilee in English. So we'll be describing 7 messengers, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls of wrath, and in some way, all of these 7s are going to have some relationship to Mount Sinai and the revelation there and all that it contains. For instance, Shavuot. The revelation is commemorated on the Feast of Shavuot. What does Shavuot mean? It means weeks, specifically 7 of them. You count 7 weeks, and then you're counting from Pesach. You count the 7 weeks, and you arrive at Shavuot, at the revelation. The seed clue for us would be Deuteronomy 16, verses 1 through 17. And that passage, it will summarize the 3 Chagim, and these are the foot festivals. These are the 3 festivals where the males were expected to go up to Jerusalem to worship. Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. And you say, well, why does it only describe 3? Why not 7? Well, probably if you're there for the 3, you're also there for the 7, just because of the way that they're set up. But it emphasizes these particular 3, I believe, because again, it gives you the balance. You got Passover, Shavuot, Sukkot, and within them is contained the totality of the 7. If you keep these 3, the chances of you're not keeping the interim feast is pretty slim. But I think it's because there's overlapping themes. If you look at those 3, again, it's going to contain the totality of everything working together as one to bind these 3 Moedim together. There's an overarching message that it takes these 3 Moedim to convey to us with all their details. And I think that overriding theme of these 3 feasts is going to be Jubilee or Yovel. At any rate, let's just do some bullet points on the key identifiers of the Jubilees. The key identifiers of the Jubilees. First of all, these Yovel years, they are known as freedom from servitude. You know, the Hebrew servant will go free. A return to the land. And we're told that the land belongs to Adonai. You might be returning to your land, but it goes back to, is it really your land? Or is it his land that he has allotted to you? But it's his, but you return to your assigned portion in that land. For those who have no land, no assigned land to which they could return, it might be stranger, alien, orphan, widow, Levite, provision still has to be made for them. In terms of Ezekiel, the instruction is pretty much, if it's a stranger who doesn't, have a place of inheritance, just let him settle in whatever tribal territory he wants to. He still has a portion. It's characterized by movement. This is a year of movement where people who might have moved over here, now they're moving back to their inheritance. It's characterized by shofars and trumpets. Again, Yovlim. It's characterized by circles and circuits, things going around in circles and cycles. It's characterized by first fruits and tithes. It's characterized by 7s and 7 times 7s. Again, it takes us to the trumpets of Revelation. And so a great place to make a lot of these connections is going to be Shavuot at Sinai. And then look back at the time when Israel conquers the land under Joshua and Eleazar, and they conquered Jericho, which is a story that is told in 7s, 7 times 7s. So if we put the revelation of the Torah at Shavuot at Sinai, and we stack it over here with the conquest of Jericho, and remember, this is going to be around the time of Pesach. They're crossing the Jordan at the time of Pesach. Again, you can see why the revelation at Sinai really is tied to the spring feast, and then we'll see how it's tied to the fall feasts. So Leviticus 25:9 and Joshua 6:8, they can both help us kind of get a grasp on what's accomplished with the shofar blast. And what we're looking for is the motion of it. Remember, we said one of the things that is characterized here by the blast of a trumpet or a shofar or a yovel, it's going to be motion. And you say, motion how? With any wind instrument, that's exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to move the wind in a particular way. You produce particular sounds by manipulating the movement of the air through the instrument, through your lips, and so forth. But there's a specific verb that is associated with the blowing of the shofar. So listen to this. You shall then sound, in Hebrew, ha'avarta, a ram's horn abroad on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the Day of Atonement, you shall sound a horn all through your land. And it was so, that when Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests, carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Lord, went forward. Avru. You hear that same Hebrew root that was in Leviticus 25:9, ha'avarta, you sound the ram's horn, ha'avarta. And now in the time of Joshua, he wants the priest to go forward with the ram's horns, and he says, go forward, avru, and blew the trumpets. And the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. So when they sounded the shofar, the ark of the covenant followed them. So let's look at that root word in Hebrew, avar. The root of it means one who crosses over. It's a passing back and forth. This is where you get the word Hebrew, ivri. An ivri is someone who has crossed over. In a very simple sense, of course, Abraham crossed the Euphrates and he crossed into the promised land. In a prophetic sense, it's going to be those who cross the Euphrates, and if you can kind of remember the rivers of Eden, we've got the Pishon River out here. It says it circled around. We've got the Gihon River. It circled around. Then we've got the Chidekel, which is the Tigris. It says it walked. And then this river right here is the Parat, or the Euphrates in English river. This is the Euphrates. And so the Euphrates was sourced from an upper garden, and it says it flowed out of the garden, and then it watered the whole garden. So it flowed out of what garden? The upper garden into the lower garden, where Adam and Eve were placed. And so the Euphrates from above, or the Parat, the fruitful river, flowed into the lower garden. Not the natural river you see today. It's just a natural boundary and a marker. At one point, under David, I think David did fight as far as the Euphrates while he was king. But for the most part, in most of history, the kingdom has not extended that far. The prophets say that it will in the times of Messiah. So crossing, again, the Euphrates, Abraham crosses the Euphrates River. What is it talking about? Just the physical river he crossed? Or is it talking about Abraham crossing back into the Garden of Eden and seeing the place where his descendants would inherit, where his descendants would be restored back into the Garden of Eden? What do we mean by that? Well, if you remember, there's a particular Torah portion called Lech Lecha. And Abraham is told to arise and walk the land, the length and the breadth of the land, because this is what his descendants are going to inherit. Well, if you think about it, Abraham's already in the land. Why does he need to arise and walk? He's already been walking around. Why do you need to tell somebody to arise if you're telling them to walk? Well, words are specific in Scripture. Abraham needed to come up a level and see something he didn't see on an everyday basis. He needed to see something that you don't normally see in the natural realm, especially after death entered in to the world. So Abraham is understood. He arises and he walks. Remember this river right here, the Tigris, the Chidakau? It's not described the same as the Pishon and the Gihon. These circled. They went around. This one, it says it just walked. Holech. Well, what is Abraham told to do? Lech. Lech lecha. Walk. Walk. Where would the tree of life have been located? Probably right here in the midst of the garden. In fact, in Revelation, the tree of life is described as being on both sides of the river and extending. So what did Abraham see? It sounds like he was able to arise and to walk and to see the Israel that his descendants would eventually inherit in the resurrection. And it sounds like he even was able to walk around the tree of life. And so he also saw his bosom, where his descendants who are righteous would be collected into this place that he had seen, this place of promise. And like him, they would also be Hebrews. They would be able to cross over this river. They would be able to cross the rivers of Eden and be restored back into the garden at the resurrection. So just from those couple of verses there, you can see that the Yovel, the shofar, and the trumpets are pretty much equivalent expressions. And in an equivalent expression, the three things are not identical, but they are comparable. And so if you take them together, then you get a bigger picture, a more robust picture than if you just said Yovel, or if you just said trumpet, or if you just said shofar. Each of them describes crossing over in some way. That's what the sound of the shofar does. That's what the sound of the trumpet does. That's what the sound of the Yovel does. It pretty much proclaims that a Hebrew has crossed over. Think of the trumpets being blown at the 7 feasts. Well, if the trumpets or the shofars are blown at the 7 feasts, the idea is that those who have assembled there in faith, listening for that sound, they are sounding and listening and practicing for the day when they will cross over into the garden. They will be resurrected from the dead. They'll be gathered up in the cloud to be able to see what Abraham saw. The trumpets in Revelation, likewise, they heralded the revelation of the ark up in the heavenlies. It talks about the temple of God which is in heaven was opened, and the ark of his covenant appeared in his temple, and there were flashes of lightning and sounds and peals of thunder and an earthquake and a great hailstorm. Well, this sounds very much like Mount Sinai at the giving of the Torah. When the Torah was revealed to the people, it talks in different places about the flashes of lightning, the peals of thunder, the quaking, the hailstorm, and of course the great sound. It says they could see the sounds at Sinai. Well, likewise, at Jericho, you have 7 priests, and they're going to blow 7 Yovel shofars. That will link revelation of the Torah at Mount Sinai and the revelation of John. Because what the reader should know is that you need to believe Moses forever. This is exactly what Yeshua taught. In John 5:46, he said, if you believed Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote about me. But if you do not believe his writings, how will you believe my words? That's pretty sobering. If you can't believe Moses, you can't believe Yeshua. That would upset a lot of apple carts. But there were 7 messengers in John's revelation of the great Jubilee of the saints. And at Jericho, we have 7 priests who go before the ark. The ark contains the Torah. It takes you back to Sinai. What are they about to receive? The Torah. So these Yovlim, they are linguistically connected, whether we're talking about the revelation at Mount Sinai of the Torah, or whether we're talking about these shofars that were blown on the circuits around Jericho that made the walls fall down so that they could cross over. The fall of Jericho's walls, really, that with the Jordan, it marked their crossing over. These things were necessary to be able to get about the business of taking back the land. So we have Joshua 6:6, it says, or excuse me, 6:4, it says, also 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. Then on the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. And then verse 6, so Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests carry 7 trumpets of ram's horn before the ark of the Lord. So compare that to the 7 bowls of wrath and John's revelation. There's another Jubilee connection, because the same blood that had protected Israel in Egypt, it has relevance to every other person. It's not that the blood on the doorposts of the Israelites was irrelevant to the Egyptians. It was very relevant to the Egyptians, because as the death angel goes through, he sees the blood on the doorpost, he passes by the blood of the Israelite. Or anybody could put the blood on the doorpost if they believed Moses. You believe Moses, you'll believe me. So let's say you were an Egyptian. You put the blood on the doorpost. That's all that's necessary. It's a sign of faith. But without it, it's the absence of the blood that's going to mark your home for the death angel. You see how that works? Sometimes it's the absence of a sign that marks a person. The absence of the sign that brings about the destruction. Because the same symbol, the blood, that sanctified one house or that sanctified one person, the absence of that blood is going to mark another one for destruction. The seal works 2 ways. You're either sealed. If you're not sealed, then you're marked. It's pretty much that simple. That's why Yeshua said, don't be lukewarm. Figure out where you want to be. At Mount Sinai, Moses caught the blood. Remember they sacrificed animals there at Sinai? And he puts half of it on the altar as a sign of the covenant. And then half of it, it says he caught in basins. And then the blood from these basins he takes and he sprinkles it on the people themselves. And so at that point, a conditional covenant, like the Torah, this conditional covenant becomes a very serious thing. Because now the people are bound by the covenant. They've just made a statement. We will do and we will hear. Now they're bound to do and to hear because the blood is the sign upon them. So you've got the bowls of covenant blood, which could seal them over. But you've also got these bowls of covenant blood that can become bowls of wrath. See now, because you're in covenant, if you violate it, it can become a bowl of wrath. And as it turned out, they did not do or hear very long, because Moses disappeared up the mountain, they became impatient, they made a golden calf, And so that generation of warriors, they had to die out. You know, it says in Joshua 5, that generation of warriors died out. Now, what was Moses catching this blood in? If it's a basin, the word there is aganim, aganim. And it can mean a basin, it can mean a cup, it can mean a goblet, right? It can be a normal cup, or it can be a basin, just something to catch things in. Well, what other connections do we have there? If he's catching this in cups. Remember, at the Passover Seder, there's an extra cup called the cup of Elijah that nobody drinks. But that particular cup is set there for Elijah because it's thought that Elijah will proclaim the coming of Messiah 3 days before he arrives. And so everybody, you know, as you go through the Seder, you've got that cup of Elijah, you got the place set for Elijah. And then at some point in the Seder, usually the kids will go open the door just to see if Elijah might be there that night. And of course, he's never there. One night he will be. Here's the problem with the cup of Elijah. Elijah is heralding the coming of Messiah and the wrath of the Lamb. And so that cup is a cup of wrath that's going to be poured out. We've got cups of wrath, bowls of wrath, and a cup and a bowl can be the same word in Hebrew. You've also got a Jewish marriage custom that kind of commemorates these 7 cups, except these are cups of blessing because they're shared at a wedding. So think of the marriage supper of the Lamb, where there might be 7 cups of blessing. But alternatively, if you're not part of the bride, those 7 cups could actually be cups of wrath as they are drunk. But the newlyweds share in these 7 cups of blessing during their marriage week. And the Kiddush cup, it's always seen as a sanctification. Again, you've got the sanctification cup at the Passover Seder. But if Moses used 7 basins to consecrate Israel to the Holy One and to Moses at Mount Sinai, remember, you have to believe him, then there's an echo in the words of the Jewish groom as he shares the cup with his bride. He gives her the ring, and when he gives her the ring, he says, Harai at mekudeshet li b'taba'at zu, kedat Moshe v'Yisrael, which translates, be made holy to me with this ring in accordance with the law of Moses and Israel. When you see why Yeshua said, if you don't believe Moses, you won't believe me? If it's a marriage, if it's a matter of marriage, that's the blessing with the law of Moses and Israel. He gave the Torah through Moses. You accept that covenant with a cup of sanctification. Every Shabbat you have this cup of sanctification, this cup of holiness. And so in this ceremony, the bride is made holy to one man. She's set apart from all others. And at Sinai, Israel was made holy to one God, set apart from all others. And there is no God beside him. And the ring for her was to be a sign forever, the Shabbat. And the ceremony, it's marked by 7 blessings. And the 7th day is a visible, tangible sign of a virtuous woman. So think about the woman in the wilderness, being set apart, being designated as the one who has maintained the testimony of Yeshua and the commandments of God. That's a lot of bowls and cups. I know we just kind of crunched them all together there. But take time and think about each one. Think about whether Moses would have used those 7 basins. Maybe he just used 1 basin. But the suggestion there is if he's affecting this marriage covenant with Israel, between Israel and the Holy One, then probably 7 basins there. 7 blessings over the 7 cups. But that's the seriousness of a covenant. While it makes you holy and sanctifies you on the one hand, should you be adulterous and rebellious on the other hand, it will become a cup of wrath upon you.